Depending upon your point of view, the Epic of Gilgamesh may be considered a biography of a legendary king, a love story, a comedy, a tragedy, a precarious adventure, or perhaps an anthology of origin stories. All these elements are present in the narrative, and the diversity of the text is only matched by its literary sophistication. Perhaps surprisingly, given the extreme antiquity of the material, the epic is a masterful blending of complex existential queries, rich imagery, and dynamic characters. Despite the fantastical elements of the narrative and its protagonist, Gilgamesh remains a very human character, one who experiences the same heartbreaks, limitations, and simple pleasures that shape the universal quality of the human condition. Gilgamesh explores the nature and meaning of being human and asks the questions that continue to be debated in modern day. What is the meaning of life and love? What is life really? And am I doing it right? How do we cope with life's brevity and uncertainty, and how do we deal with loss? The epic also provides the reader with a useful case study in what not to do if one is in the exceptional circumstance of reigning over the ancient city of Uruk. In ancient Mesopotamia, the correct behavior of the king was necessary for maintaining earthly and heavenly order. Despite the gravity of this royal duty, Gilgamesh seems to do everything wrong. He kills the guardian Humbaba and ransacks his precious cedar forest. He insults the goddess of love, Ishtar, and slays the mighty bull of heaven. He finds the key to eternal youth, but then loses it just as quickly to a passing snake. Through these misadventures, Gilgamesh strives for fame and immortality, but instead finds love with his companion Enkidu and a deeper understanding of the limits of humanity and the importance of community. The Epic of Gilgamesh was wildly famous in antiquity, with its impact traceable to the later literary worlds of the Homeric epics and the Hebrew Bible. Yet, in modern day, even the most erudite readers of ancient literature might struggle to outline its plot or name its characters. So, why this modern-day cultural amnesia surrounding one of the world's greatest works of ancient literature? Well, the answer lies in the history of the narrative's reception. While many of the great literary works of ancient Rome and Greece were studied continuously throughout the development of Western culture, the Epic of Gilgamesh comes from a forgotten age. Gilgamesh was written in cuneiform script, the world's oldest known form of writing. The earliest strands of Gilgamesh's narrative can be found in 5 Sumerian poems, and other versions include those written in Elamite, Hittite, and Hurrian. The best-known version is the Standard Babylonian version, written in Akkadian, a language written in cuneiform that functioned as the language of diplomacy in the 2nd millennium BCE. The disappearance of the cuneiform writing system around the time of the 1st century CE accelerated Gilgamesh's sharp slide into anonymity. For almost 2 millennia, clay tablets containing stories of Gilgamesh and his companions lay lost and buried, alongside many tens of thousands of other cuneiform texts, beneath the remnants of the great library of Ashurbanipal. The modern rediscovery of the epic was a watershed moment in the understanding of the ancient Near East. The 11th tablet of the epic was first translated by self-taught cuneiform scholar George Smith in 1872. Smith discovered the presence of an ancient Babylonian flood narrative in the text with striking parallels to the biblical flood story of the Book of Genesis. From these beginnings in the mid-19th century, the process of recovering the cuneiform literary catalog continues today. In 2014, the publication of a new fragment of Tablet 5 made international news. The revised reconstruction of Tablet 5 yields text that is nearly 20 lines longer than previously known. The most interesting piece of information provided by this news source is the continuation of the description of the cedar forest. Gilgamesh and Enkidu saw monkeys as part of the exotic and noisy fauna of the cedar forest. This was not mentioned in other versions of the epic. Additionally, Humbaba emerges not as a barbarian ogre, but as a foreign ruler entertained with exotic music at court in the manner of Babylonian kings.
The story introduces Gilgamesh, king of Uruk. Gilgamesh, 2/3 god and 1/3 man, is oppressing his people, who cry out to the gods for help. For the young women of Uruk, this oppression takes the form of a droit du seigneur, or lord's right, to sleep with brides on their wedding night. Gilgamesh exhausts the young men through games, tests of strength, or perhaps forced labor on building projects. The gods respond to the people's pleas by creating an equal to Gilgamesh, who will be able to stop his oppression. This is Enkidu, who is covered in hair and lives in the wild. He is spotted by a trapper, whose livelihood is being ruined because Enkidu is uprooting his traps. The trapper tells the sun god Shamash about the man, and it is arranged for Enkidu to be seduced by Shamat, a temple prostitute, his first step towards being tamed. After 6 days and 7 nights of love-making and teaching Enkidu about the ways of civilization, she takes Enkidu to a shepherd's camp to learn how to be civilized. Gilgamesh, meanwhile, has been having dreams about the imminent arrival of a beloved new companion and asks his mother, the goddess Ninsun, to help interpret these dreams. In Tablet 2, Shamhat brings Enkidu to the shepherd's camp, where he is introduced to a human diet and becomes the night watchman. Learning from a passing stranger about Gilgamesh's treatment of new brides, Enkidu is incensed and travels to Uruk to intervene at a wedding. When Gilgamesh attempts to visit the wedding chamber, Enkidu blocks his way and they fight. After a fierce battle, Enkidu acknowledges Gilgamesh's superior strength and they become friends. Gilgamesh proposes a journey to the cedar forest to slay the monstrous demigod Humbaba in order to gain fame and renown. Despite warnings from Enkidu and the Council of Elders, Gilgamesh is not deterred. Tablet 3 explains how Gilgamesh received advice from his elders for his journey ahead. Gilgamesh visits his mother, Ninsun, who seeks the support and protection of the sun god Shamash for their adventure. Ninsun adopts Enkidu as her son, and Gilgamesh leaves instructions for the governance of Uruk in his absence. In Tablet 4, Gilgamesh and Enkidu journey to the cedar forest. Every few days they camp on a mountain and perform a dream ritual. Gilgamesh has 5 terrifying dreams about falling mountains, thunderstorms, wild bulls, and a thunderbird that breathes fire. Despite similarities between his dream figures and earlier descriptions of Humbaba, Enkidu interprets these dreams as good omens and denies that the frightening images represent the forest guardian. As they approach the cedar mountain, they hear Humbaba bellowing and must encourage each other not to be afraid. Tablet 5 introduces us to Humbaba. After the heroes enter the cedar forest, Humbaba, the guardian of the cedar forest, insults and threatens them. He accuses Enkidu of betrayal and vows to disembowel Gilgamesh and feed his flesh to the birds. Gilgamesh is afraid, but with some encouraging words from Enkidu, the battle commences. The mountains quake with the tumult, and the sky turns black. The god Shamash sends 13 winds to bind Humbaba, and he is captured. Humbaba pleads for his life, and Gilgamesh pities him. He offers to make Gilgamesh king of the forest, to cut the trees for him, and to be his slave. Enkidu, however, argues that Gilgamesh should kill Humbaba to establish his reputation forever. Humbaba curses them both, and Gilgamesh dispatches him with a blow to the neck, as well as killing his 7 sons. The 2 heroes cut down many cedars, including a gigantic tree that Enkidu plans to fashion into a gate for the temple of Enlil. They build a raft and return home along the Euphrates with the giant tree and, possibly, the head of Humbaba. In Tablet 6, we see Gilgamesh reject the advances of the goddess Ishtar because of her mistreatment of previous lovers like Dumuzi. Ishtar asks her father Anu to send the bull of heaven to avenge her. When Anu rejects her complaints, Ishtar threatens to raise the dead, who will outnumber the living and devour them. Anu states that if he gives her the bull of heaven, Uruk will face 7 years of famine. Ishtar provides him with provisions for 7 years in exchange for the bull. Ishtar leads the bull of heaven to Uruk, and he causes widespread devastation. He lowers the level of the Euphrates River and dries up the marshes. He opens huge pits that swallow 300 men. Without any divine assistance, Enkidu and Gilgamesh murder him and offer up his heart to Shamash. When Ishtar cries out, Enkidu hurls one of the hindquarters of the bull at her. The city of Uruk celebrates, but Enkidu has an ominous dream about his future failure. In Enkidu's dream, the gods decide that one of the heroes must die because they killed Humbaba and the bull of heaven. Despite the protestations of Shamash, Enkidu is marked for death. Enkidu curses the great door he has fashioned for Enlil's temple. He also curses the trapper and Shamat for removing him from the wild. Shamash reminds Enkidu of how Shamat fed and clothed him and introduced him to Gilgamesh. Shamash tells him that Gilgamesh will bestow great honors upon him at his funeral and will wander into the wild consumed with grief. Enkidu regrets his curses and blesses Shamat instead. In a second dream, however, he sees himself being taken captive to the netherworld, a house of dust and darkness, whose inhabitants eat clay, and are clothed in bird feathers, supervised by terrifying beings. For 12 days, Enkidu's condition worsens. Finally, after a lament that he could not meet a heroic death in battle, he dies. In a famous line from the epic, Gilgamesh clings to Enkidu's body and denies that he has died until a maggot drops from the nose of the corpse. In Tablet 8, Gilgamesh delivers a lament for Enkidu, in which he calls upon mountains, forests, fields, rivers, wild animals, and all of Uruk to mourn for his friend. Recalling their adventures together, Gilgamesh tears at his hair and clothes in grief. He commissions a funerary statue and provides grave gifts from his treasury to ensure that Enkidu has a favorable reception in the realm of the dead. A great banquet is held where the treasures are offered to the gods of the netherworld. Just before a break in the text, there is a suggestion that a river is being dammed, indicating a burial in a riverbed, as in the corresponding Sumerian poem, The Death of Gilgamesh. Tablet 9 opens with Gilgamesh roaming the wild wearing skins, grieving for Enkidu. Having now become fearful of his own death, he decides to seek Utnapishtim and learn the secret of eternal life. Among the few survivors of the Great Flood, Utnapishtim and his wife are the only humans to have been granted immortality by the gods. Gilgamesh crosses a mountain pass at night and encounters a pride of lions. Before sleeping, he prays for protection to the moon god Sin. Then, waking from an encouraging dream, he murders the lions and uses their skins for clothing. After a long and perilous journey, Gilgamesh arrives at the twin peaks of Mount Mashu at the end of the earth. He comes across a tunnel which no man has ever entered, guarded by 2 scorpion monsters who appear to be a married couple. The husband tries to dissuade Gilgamesh from passing, but the wife intervenes, expresses sympathy for Gilgamesh, and allows his passage. He passes under the mountains along the road of the sun. In complete darkness, he follows the road for 12 double hours, managing to complete the trip before the sun catches up with him. He arrives at the Garden of the Gods, a paradise full of jewel-laden trees. In Tablet 10, Gilgamesh meets alewife Siduri, who assumes that he is a murderer or thief because of his disheveled appearance. Gilgamesh tells her about the purpose of his journey. She attempts to dissuade him from his quest, but sends him to Urshanabi, the ferryman, who will help him cross the sea to Utnapishtim. Gilgamesh, out of spontaneous rage, destroys the stone charms that Urshanabi keeps with him. Gilgamesh tells his story, but when he asks for help, Urshanabi informs him that he has just destroyed the objects that can help them cross the waters of death, which are deadly to the touch. Urshanabi instructs Gilgamesh to cut down 120 trees and fashion them into punting poles. When they reach the island where Utnapishtim lives, Gilgamesh recounts his story, asking him for his help. Utnapishtim reprimands him, declaring that fighting the common fate of humans is futile and diminishes life's joys. Gilgamesh observes that Utnapishtim seems no different from himself and asks him how he obtained his immortality. Utnapishtim explains that the gods decided to send a great flood. To save Utnapishtim, the god Enki told him to build a boat. He gave him precise dimensions, and it was sealed with pitch and bitumen. His entire family went aboard together with his craftsmen and all the animals of the field. A violent storm then arose, which caused the terrified gods to retreat to the heavens. Ishtar lamented the wholesale destruction of humanity, and the other gods wept beside her. The storm lasted 6 days and nights, after which all the human beings turned to clay. Utnapishtim weeps when he sees the destruction. His boat lodges on a mountain, and he releases a dove, a swallow, and a raven. When the raven fails to return, he opens the ark and frees its inhabitants. Utnapishtim offers a sacrifice to the gods, who smell the sweet savor and gather around. Ishtar vows that just as she will never forget the brilliant necklace that hangs around her neck, she will always remember this time. When Enlil arrives, angry that there are survivors, she condemns him for instigating the flood. Enki also castigates him for sending a disproportionate punishment. Enlil blesses Utnapishtim and his wife, and rewards them with eternal life. The main point seems to be that when Enlil granted eternal life, it was a unique gift. As if to demonstrate this point, Utnapishtim challenges Gilgamesh to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. Gilgamesh falls asleep, and Utnapishtim instructs his wife to bake a loaf of bread on each of the days he is asleep, so that he cannot deny his failure to keep awake. Gilgamesh, who is seeking to overcome death, cannot even conquer sleep. After instructing Urshanabi, the ferryman, to wash Gilgamesh and clothe him in royal robes, they depart for Uruk. As they are leaving, Utnapishtim's wife asks her husband to offer a parting gift. Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh that at the bottom of the sea there lives a boxthorn-like plant that will make him young again. Gilgamesh, by binding stones to his feet so he can walk on the bottom, manages to obtain the plant. Gilgamesh proposes to investigate if the plant has the hypothesized rejuvenation ability by testing it on an old man once he returns to Uruk. When Gilgamesh stops to bathe, it is stolen by a serpent who sheds their skin as they depart. Gilgamesh weeps at the futility of his efforts because he has now lost all chance of immortality. He returns to Uruk, where the sight of its massive walls prompts him to praise this enduring work to Urshanabi. Tablet 12 is mainly an Akkadian translation of an earlier Sumerian poem, Gilgamesh and the Netherworld, also known as Gilgamesh, Enkidu, and the Netherworld, and variants, although it has been suggested that it is derived from an unknown version of that story. The contents of this last tablet are inconsistent with previous ones. Enkidu is still alive, despite having died earlier in the epic. Because of this, its lack of integration with the other tablets, and the fact that it is almost a copy of an earlier version, it has been referred to as an inorganic appendage to the epic. Gilgamesh complains to Enkidu that many of his possessions have fallen into the underworld. Enkidu offers to bring them back. Delighted, Gilgamesh tells Enkidu what he must and must not do in the underworld if he is to return. Enkidu does everything which he was told not to do. The underworld keeps him. Gilgamesh prays to the gods to give him back his friend. Enlil and Suen do not reply, but Enki and Shamash decide to help. Shamash makes a crack in the earth, and Enkidu's ghost jumps out of it. The tablet ends with Gilgamesh questioning Enkidu about what he has seen in the underworld. The preceding summary and analysis of the Epic of Gilgamesh is what you may call the official academic version. Of course, regular viewers of the archive understand that this epic goes far beyond its classification as a myth assigned to it by mainstream academia. The Epic of Gilgamesh is actually directly related to the ancient astronaut hypothesis in that Gilgamesh's actions had far-reaching implications when it came to the power dynamics of the Anunnaki. The archive recently explained these implications in our video about the Tower of Babel. A time-stamped link is provided in the description beneath this video. On behalf of the archive, I want to convey our sincere gratitude for your viewership and support. If you have not already done so, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new presentations. And until next time, remember, all great truths begin as blasphemies.